Morning, guys, from a cold and wet Dahlstrom. We were meant to go out to the Dahlstrom Birds of Prey this morning and do the birds in flight photography, but because of the rain and the mist, they actually cancelled that, and we'll get our refund soon. So we decided to just do a quick review of the gear that we've been using this last week or so. Prasheen is here now behind me. So we're just gonna do a quick review. Prasheen shoots Canon, as you know. I shoot Sony. He's trying to convince me to buy a 600mm lens, but that's 250,000 I don't have at the moment. He says I must open up a OnlyFans account and I can afford it. Okay, so I think we'll start off with Prasheen and his gear first, and then I'll do mine.
Hi guys, we've moved inside because for some strange reason at 8 a.m. the estate decided to deploy their leaf blowers, so we moved inside. Okay, so I have three camera combinations, camera and lens combinations. The first one I'll start off with is my trusty telephoto combination. So I have the Canon 500 f4. I have a 1.4 teleconverter, the EF to R mount, and then my trusty Canon R5. This rig is predominantly used for birds, birds in flight, subjects that are quite far away. So I actually managed to get some good elephant shots, giraffe shots because of the long neck, rhino shots with this rig. The big pro of this rig is that image quality is second to none, especially with these telephoto L lenses that Canon produces. Definitely pin sharp, no problem around that. Autofocus speed is also pretty good as well. The 1.4 teleconverter is the Mark III version. Sometimes I took this off and put it back on interchangeably. It depends on how close you can actually get to the subject. And then the cons of the actual lens itself is that it's pretty heavy. It's about 4 kilograms, the lens itself. And it's quite difficult to actually maneuver in the car. So many times I had to slowly sort of maneuver without hitting Pranesh in the head, or I had to actually use a sort of a beanbag that Pranesh lent me just to rest it on my knee and then shoot through the window. Then we move on to the Canon R5. I've only had this for about 3 months now, but I can't go back to shooting DSLR. I mean, I think I've been converted into um, an R5 shooter now. Just it's 45 megapixels, eye autofocus. Just the EVF is like very lag free. Everything is just on point. I mean, I have the ability to shoot 8K video if I really wanted to, although I do think it's overkill. 2 card slots, yeah, and it's built like a tank. I mean, think I've dropped this once and it's like hardly shown any marks. It's quite light as well, lighter than many DSLRs out there now. Image quality is also perfect. I can crop well into the frame because of the 45 megapixel if I can't get close to the subject, and if I do get close to the subject I can print quite large. Yeah, so that's the first rig that I have with me. The second rig predominantly was for cats. So one of the goals on this trip was to shoot some large cats that are walking towards me. So I managed to use the 500 for the leopard when the leopard was quite far down the road from us, and then I quickly switched the R5 body into this here, and this is the 100-400. So it gives me a good focal length. Yeah, 100-400 Mark II. It gives me quite a good range of focal length, so I was able to get the leopard almost like with touching distance of the car, zooming in and zooming out. Yeah, no, this lens is a very trustworthy lens. It's very fast with its focus speeds, very good image quality. Can't say more good things about this.
Then, yeah, and when you're shooting the 100-400 compared to the 500, you've got 14 frames
Yeah,
versus
so
yeah.
something that I actually learned the few days before I got to Kruger was because my 500 is a Mark 1 lens. Um, the R5 limits it's because there's a lot of glass to move. It limits it to about 7 frames per second, whereas on the 100 400 Mark 2, because there's not a lot of glass to move when you need to focus. I get the full 14 frames per second on this lens. So I was able to fill the buffer within 3 or 4 seconds of the leopard, whereas I've never been able to fill the buffer on the R5 attached to the 500. I know it's only an issue with the 500 Mark 1 or the Mark 1 lenses. The Mark 2, they give you the full 14 frames per second.
And if you buy a RF lens, you'll get 20 frames per second.
Electronic, true,
yeah.
yeah. Then I have my old trusty 70 Mark II attached to it. I didn't use this much on the trip. Basically, whenever I had the opportunity to switch to the R5, I'd rather use the R5's capabilities, given that the R5 has better, is full frame, so it has better light or ISO performance. It has eye autofocus. The EVF, you can measure the composition and the exposure on the EVF, and just is a much easier camera body to use than the 70 Mark II. I did shoot with this for 2 years, so this was my primary go-to body before the R5. Very well built, 10 frames per second, tracks well. Especially, I would use this in birds in flight as well because it tracks well. Much more AF points as well to track. Yeah, ISO performance on this camera is not that good. I would limit it to about 800 and below. Otherwise, you're not getting any detail and too much noise in the images. And it's crop sensor, so it gives you the extra 1.6 times reach that you need if the subject's too far. So yeah, trust the 70 Mark II. And then the final camera that I brought with me is my 60 Mark 1. I have this 16 to 35 f4 attached to this. This is Pranesh's lens. He also lent me his 24 to 70 2.8. I only use this lens here for the shooting landscapes. The 24 to 70 was mainly used to compose more like wildlife landscapes, so the giraffe and like a acacia tree, or a leopard that's far in the distance that's like sort of rubbing its back against a marula tree, for example. I use the 24 to 70 because of the reach. Both the 2470 and the 1635 I had no issues with. The focus was quite fast, image quality is quite good. I mean, they are L series lenses from Canon, and most of them are built well, and they are image quality is second to none. Then on the 60 Mark 1, again it's full frame, 20 megapixel. ISO performance is very good. On par with probably the R5, maybe slightly below, to be honest. I mainly use this to shoot large landscapes because when I have the 24 to 70 attached to it. Again, I didn't use this that much on the trip. I actually use this probably more than the 70 Mark II, given that it has good ISO performance. The one downside of this camera is that it only has 9 AF points, or 11 with the center point, and it only shoots at like 6 frames per second, so it's quite slow, but the image quality is quite crisp and quite sharp. You can't really crop into this because it's 20 megapixel again, but again it's trustworthy. Yeah, can't complain. Just a couple negatives, because I have the R5 now. I tend to shoot more with the R5, but I've used this to shoot sunbirds in flight, and there's no problem. Just I didn't get a lot of series of shots because it's a low frame rate, but it was still punch sharp when I did get them. Yeah, and that's basically the 3 sets that I used.
Hi guys, so now it's my turn to go with my setups. So firstly, I've got my A7 III with the 100-400 lens on it. So this was the Sony rig that I switched to when I moved from Canon. So when Prasheen said he's got the 70 and the 60, those were my old cameras. And then in 2018, I switched to Sony because, like he says, the 70 was getting a bit long in the tooth for me, and I was wanting to shoot something that was a little bit faster and had a little bit more image quality and better ISO performance. So I got the A7 III when it was released in South Africa. So I've been shooting it since May 2018. So shutter speed on the high plus, it captures all the action that you can ever see. It's got a 24 megapixel sensor that allows some cropping, but it's not as good as Prasheen's 45 megapixel, where you can almost crop half of the picture out. With the 100-400 on, you struggle to get good bird photography, because generally you are not close enough with the full frame, and at 400 you're not getting close enough, and you'll have to crop quite significantly to get especially the smaller birds filling the frame. Then the 100-400 lens, I mean, this is my go-to wildlife lens. It's a f 4.5 to 5.6. It's just, I think, over 1 kilo, so it's about 1.1 kilos. So I mean, I can hold it one-handedly and shoot no problems. It does expand when you zoom out to 400, and you can actually make that smooth or tight. I've got it set on smooth, so it's easy, but you can set it on tight, and then it doesn't fall back from wherever you have it zoomed out to. This is my lens when I'm shooting larger animals. So anything other than birds, I'm shooting with the 100-400 and my A7 III. What I've been doing recently is also hand holding this to shoot some video. It's not terribly stable because you still got handshake and things like that, but I try to stabilize it on either the car door or on my own arm, and shoot video that way. And you can get some good wildlife video just with this rig without even a tripod on. Yeah, so this is the second body. I've used it quite a lot this last week. I filled up one card. I'm on my second card now, with video and pictures. With the 100-400, at 100 you can get more of the landscape, animals in their environment shot, and at 400 you're getting closer up portraits, depending on how far the animals are. Good battery life, if you keep switching it on and off. It doesn't have an auto off on it, so one of the disadvantages is if you're shooting the whole day and you're not getting chance in between, it's going to last maybe 6 or 7 hours before the battery's gone. So I've got 4 spare batteries for between the two cameras, and I think that suffices when I'm out in the bush. Get to camp and recharge in the afternoons. Okay, then on to the second rig that I have. So this is the A9 Mark 1 and the 200-600 that Sony released after the 100-400. I think they released the 200-600 as a native E-mount because a lot of the wildlife photographers, and especially the birding photographers, were finding that that 100-400 was a bit short, especially for the birding. I've almost had it set at 600 the whole time when I'm shooting birding. There's very few times that I've actually had to zoom out to get the full bird in the frame. Unlike the 100-400, this lens has internal zooming, so it doesn't expand. This is just the lens hood, which comes out, and then that's the size of the lens. So it's at 600 at the moment, and it doesn't expand, which is an advantage, but it's still more sizable than the 100-400. This is about a kilo heavier than the 100-400. So moving it around handheld is still possible, but after a while your hand does get a bit tired. Then onto the the A9. I got this camera body second hand from OMS. Someone had been selling it for 35,000, so it was the price of the new A7 III at the time. And I had my second camera body, which was the 6D at the time. So I said, no, let me get rid of the 6D and get this A9 as a backup. Well, not as a backup. I use it now more as the primary camera, and the A7 III is now the backup. This does 20 frames per second in the electronic shutter mode. So the high shooting mode is 20 frames per second. Its autofocus is, I think, superb. The autofocus tracking is, when it gets the subject, it can track that subject almost forever. It's just finding the subject that may be a problem every now and again. I've been shooting with the animal eye autofocus on as well, and what I've found is that sometimes it does focus on phantom eyes. So if you're shooting a bird, it may find like an animal eye or an animal face almost in the tree behind it or the leaves behind it. So it does then tend to want to move the focus off. But then I've got the shortcut key set up so that I can quickly change the focus settings and get the focus correct as I want it. So yeah, this has been my go-to lens. One other disadvantage with shooting at high frame rates is it's got 2 card slots. I've put in 2 64 gig UHS 2 cards. I think in the first 4 days of Kruger, I filled up 3 of my cards. I had to dump 1 card, and I am shooting on that again, but I'm halfway through that card again. That's about 300 gigs of photos that I'll need to now go and download onto my computer and sift through cull and edit maybe 50 of them. So you can get carried away when you're shooting with this. You just have to be careful, but it's more maneuverable, and you can definitely handhold and track birds and pan with them as they fly. So birds in flight should be easier. I'm still practicing that and getting better at that. The other disadvantage I think that I must mention is this is a 5.6 to 6.3 lens, and even on the A9 body, which is quite good with the ISO performance, I found myself shooting at 2000 ISO in situations where I can't get more light in when shooting f6.3 or wide open. So yeah, I think low light, you'd ideally want at least that 5.6 of the 100-400, but I think to get a 200-600 at say 4.5 to 5.6 it will be difficult. I think Nikon is the one manufacturer who's done it well, where they've got a 200-500 constant 5.6, and it's quite a good lens for the price that it's at. Then lastly, just to mention the price, so this lens sells at about 41,000 at the moment. With some discounts, you could probably get it for about 38,000 rand. The 100-400 is at about 51,000 rand now. I bought it when it was still about 37,000 rand. So you'd have to look for second-hand versions of the 100-400 if you want it on the cheap. The problem is the next step up is probably a 400 f2.8 or a 600 f4, and those are costing about 250,000. So there's cheaper lenses, and then there's no intermediate lenses that you can actually move to. You have to go full pro, sell your house, open up an OnlyFans account, and make the money.
How has the experience been by using adapted lenses with the Metabones?
You can use the Metabones. So I use the wide angles where you're shooting landscape. You're not shooting 20 frames per second. You're shooting single shot most times. So I do use my 70-200. I use my 16-35 with the Metabones. Autofocus is sometimes an issue. I found that it was an issue with my 70-200. Shooting portraits, especially, the eye autofocus doesn't work and it back focuses a lot. But the 7200, I got rid of. I love that lens. The 2470 is still, a great lens to use on this when you're shooting portrait. I've got a cheap wide angle, a 24mm Samyang lens that I also use on the A7 III to shoot video on, especially like all my mom's videos, and that works quite well for the video, especially with the lights and everything where it's a controlled environment. I did not try shooting it landscape yet. Yesterday I used my 1635 and I shot at 3 rondavels. So yeah, I mean, I enjoy the cameras. I enjoy the Sony system. There's no issues with the menus and any of that. Moving from Canon, once you get to know them, you can actually shoot quite effectively with them, shoot fast with them. It's just, yeah, the glass quality between the professional lenses and the lenses I'm shooting with, you can probably notice once we shoot. Once we post like Prasheen's 500mm compared to my 600mm, you'll see the glass quality and the differences there.